Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is the evaluation for the Novium Interactive product. I'm going to be focusing on two main areas of evaluation. First of all, did I actually meet the client's needs? And secondly, actually comparing it to a professional product. Okay, so we originally met the client for the briefing, and preparing questions to actually ask the client is a really good way of sort of narrowing down where your final idea is going to be going. A lot of the time the client won't actually know what they want. So if you can sort of help them to shape that in some way, shape or form, it's a really good idea. Some of the areas that came out when we were talking to them were, they obviously wanted the theme of joy, that was the main thing. They wanted to try and bring out sort of feelings of nostalgia as well, and they were trying to sort of reach a wider audience than they were currently catering to. So I took that and I went away and I thought, okay, there's a couple of other points there. I mean, from previous, looking at previous sort of interactive exhibits in museums, obviously they're informative, so I wanted to get some kind of informative material in there. I thought it was really important to try and use one of their actual physical objects from their display, rather than just going for a theme. I wanted to actually really try and include one of their objects in it. Okay, so all my sort of primary and secondary research I think really helped to shape what actually the final product itself. Now this is actually their installation that they've got. Now it's great what it does, but what it does is not particularly interesting, unfortunately. But in checking all these bits, like Parker says here, it's great to take the best of everybody's ideas and put them into your own project. So here we've got, this is, I visited Tangmere Aviation Museum. Now they've got currently a similar sort of age range of visitors, sort of middle age, middle class, and then above. So I knew that the installations there were going to be sort of catered for that particular group. Now it's a really simple interface, really sort of obvious interactive buttons and things, and lots of informative text. But at the same time, the Novium wanted to try and hit a different audience as well. They wanted to try and get a bit younger, make something interesting for the younger audience as well. So this, from the Science Museum, shows that sort of younger appeal interactive display. Much brighter. The text here, the information is actually written it's actually posted by visitors based on more academic pieces. So you get that more easily understood language. It's a bit more complicated, so those that aren't as computer savvy probably wouldn't understand it, but there are certainly elements there that I would take, so the use of the language and sort of the bright colours and bits and pieces. This is a company called Heritage that all they do is actually make interactive displays for museums. And there's so many great qualities that I'd like to say through. One of the main ones was actually the timeline, because one of the ideas I had originally was the retelling of a memory. So I thought it would be beginning, middle and end, lovely sort of timeline flow all the way through. Right, so I got my first ideas, I started to put together a prototype, and I actually progressed quite quickly and quite far, and actually by the time I came around to a first viewing at the Novium, my initial idea had actually bloomed into a full-on working project. But as Curtis says there, it's not necessarily the best way to work on something, to settle for your first idea, to put all your eggs into one basket to work. Often it's not your first idea that's your final one. As it happens, the feedback from the Novium was actually really good. They really liked what they saw. They liked the idea of the way it moved around the desktop. They loved the fact that it used something from their collection. They really loved the flipbook animations and things. They thought it was really relevant to the piece and how the actual item that I'd chosen actually worked. Right, so actually producing the piece at the very early stages, I wanted it to be very simple and obvious to use. And as Jonathan Ive says there, who's the lead designer for Apple, don't worry about gimmicks and things, just make it, make it usable, make it, efficient and do what it's supposed to do. So, nice, simple, obvious buttons that are clearly stood out. Put that informative text in there, but try and take that simpler use of language from the Science Museum. But then at the same time, try and get some entertaining, informative bits in there. So the flipbook animations and things like that. Now, as I was working through my final product, obviously you keep looking at things and you keep seeing things and they keep inspiring you. And one thing that really inspired me was actually this piece, which is Jim Carrey's official website. It was actually created by 65 Media, and it's just incredible. I would have loved to have done something like this, but at the same time there are certain aspects to it that, as it stands, I would have had to adapt it a lot. It's great for those that are computer savvy. However, it's a really eclectic mix and mismatch of links and things that you have to search for and find. So it can be very off-putting to non-computer users. Visually, it's incredible. There are amazing transitions between each page. Virtually everything on the page is animated, and it's just a beautiful thing to behold, really. Okay, so navigation. The part puts here, it's seriously important. It's probably the most important part of the whole thing. Because if someone starts using it and they get lost or they don't know where they're going next, they're just going to walk away. So try to use the really big, obvious, bright yellow arrows to sort of guide people through it. And also within the animations, at the end of the animations, I would physically say, press the left arrow to go to the next, right arrow to go back, or press the up arrow for more information of this one is. So one of the good ideas is obviously making a sitemap. This is just a really simple example. Now, because mine is just a retelling of a memory, it's just a simple, virtually a straight line. There's only one deviation, which is if you want to look for that more informative part of it, which I put for sort of the people that already use the Novium interactive piece that they've got now. Other than that, it is more of a entertaining story than a full-on information finding thing. Right, when I was actually deciding on content for the actual piece itself, one of the things that really was a bit of an issue was, because I was talking about the moving image, and there's a lot of famous examples, Disney and people like that, copyright was something of an issue. I didn't want to include bits and pieces like that that may or may not get people into trouble. So unfortunately I ended up creating my own media to put into it. This did take a little bit longer, and it's one of those where I probably could have sort of weighed up the pros and cons of creating it and maybe seeking permission, paying for permission, whatever. The other sort of, from an ethical point of view, the actual devices that I ended up talking about, some of the original sort of reels that they used in them were of a somewhat risque nature. So, although what they considered to be risque then is not necessarily risque now, it was still one of those areas that I was a bit grey on. I didn't really want to upset anybody. So again, I sort of left it out. I did tip my hat to it in the informative section. I mentioned that that's what they were for, but I didn't really want to put half-naked ladies in the middle of the Novium. Okay, refinement. Now, there's a lot of video content within the piece, and I was very aware that this could potentially be an absolutely massive project in the sort of memory stakes on the computer. I was also quite aware that although I was creating the piece on a quite powerful laptop, it may or may not necessarily be acceptable on the Mac, it might not run them as well. Yeah, this was a bit of a slip up on my part. When it actually came to producing the final thing, it actually turned out to be a very long-winded process. I created the entire desktop as one piece in After Effects. And as you can see here, you can see where each of the videos would have come in. Now they all played at different times. I rendered the whole thing out as one tabletop. That took 4 hours to render out. To keep the quality good, it took 4 hours to render out. I then took that piece and then moved the camera around that piece and then rendered that out. That took another 3 hours. This probably could have been achieved much faster in Flash. But unfortunately my knowledge of Flash wasn't great. Probably rendering out each of the little individual videos, placing them into Flash, making some sort of motion between, camera motion between them. Probably wouldn't have taken 8 hours or whatever it took me in the end. Testing. Right, this is a real bugbear for me. This statement here is a great one, in that these days there would appear there is not much of an issue with cross-compatibility. However, when I did test it on the Mac, thinking that I've used the same piece of software that's already installed on the Mac as well, it should be fine. I created 2 versions, just to be sure. I created a high quality and a low quality version, obviously for different file size and for different sort of processor ability. Both were created in Encore, exported as a Flash video SWF file. Fine, I knew that PC would run it, Mac would run it, that's fine. Unfortunately, when I tested it on Mac, both the low and high quality didn't yield the right results. Freezing and crashing, and just generally wouldn't quite work the way they were supposed to, although the quality stayed, which was nice. The final test was actually to burn the whole thing to a DVD. Now, of course, burning the whole thing to a DVD meant I lost the HD quality, everything got that a little bit fuzzier, and it worked. Or I thought it worked. And so there was obviously an issue with drivers and software on the Macs. Eventually the DVD worked, but I actually built in a loop function to each screen, so that if somebody were to get bored, walk away from the piece, it would loop 3 times, and then return to the touchscreen. Unfortunately, it didn't work on a Mac. It does work on a PC, in a DVD player, in a Blu-ray player, in everything else. But unfortunately, there's obviously a gap there where I could have done additional testing. Right, so the private viewing actually went really well. Lots of really good feedback. Lots of people commenting on the graphical content of the piece, the actual animations and the bits and pieces. One person did spot that it didn't actually work the way it was supposed to. So, did I actually meet the client's needs? Is it simple? Yeah. It's definitely simple, really easy to use. Is it locally relevant? Not so much maybe, but certainly obviously it features something from their display. It's got fun elements to it. Obviously there's a page where you can literally just play flipbook animations. Does it invoke feelings of nostalgia? Well, I think it does. In the sense that it's talking about things from the past, quite interesting, fun things from the past. It does feature a theme of joy, 'cause it's me recapping my feeling of joy throughout the whole thing. It is informative. It's got an informative section on there that was quite nice. Does it appeal to a wider audience? Well, I think so, because it's not a plain, boring, informative, just text after text after text. It's got fun elements to it, and everybody seems to be able to use it as well. And of course it uses one of their objects. That is a measure up to professional product. Okay, so there's that simplicity there. The simplicity of the arrows and the navigation system compared to the one from Tangmere, I think it measured up really well. Simple and easy to use. Again, informative text. So you've got my informative text, which I've tried to obviously make as a sort of cross between obviously what the Novium had already and what the Science Museum used, that simplified language. Entertaining, is it entertaining? I think so. There are definitely animations throughout and video content throughout, which is fun to watch. There's also the little flip books that you can click and play with and have fun. If you compare that to sort of video screens and the fun interactive games and things that say the Science Museum have, then I think it sort of works out quite well. That fun interactiveness. What would I do differently? So many things. To start with, I definitely allowed myself more time. It did feel a little bit rushed in the end. My playing wasn't great. But Flash, I would definitely probably attempt Flash next time around. Encore really didn't cut the mustard this time. The whole thing felt very flat and inorganic. I'd like to try and get some sort of 3D in there, maybe use actual physical video footage. There's no reason why I couldn't alter that in After Effects, maybe put some bits and pieces into there. Maybe a little more informative content. I know I did put some in there, and the idea was to try and have that more fun interactive piece, but some extra would be good. And of course, better testing of the product itself. Are there any questions?
Have you ever thought of people with hearing problems? Like,
Yeah, I did. I meant to address that. I did mean to put subtitles in for all of the videos, but unfortunately, I just didn't get a chance. Unfortunately.
In terms of you thinking you might try Flash next time,
Yeah.
have you got any plans already to start like learning Flash, developing Flash skills, or are you going to have to teach yourself as you go along?
I think it's going to have to be a teach myself as I go along. That's the sort of learner I am. I have to just jump in there and start playing with things. Probably over the summer, ready for next year.
You said about better testing procedures.
Yes.
How would you elaborate a bit on that?
Allowing myself the actual time to do that would be good. Obviously, I've got access to both PC and Mac. I assumed too much, and that assumption failed me, unfortunately.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I'd really like to know how you feel about, you picked the moving image.
Yep.
From my perspective, that feels slightly like, kind of, because you're a media student, that's slightly biased
Yep.
choice.
Yep.
Do you think that was the best choice for the audience? Forget the client.
I think it was more. I think because the theme was joy, and the first thing I thought when I walked in there was, okay, I need some way of expressing joy. So I thought the easiest way to express the joy is through my own personal experience of that. Whether I could have approached it in a different way, to try and sort of bring out more feelings of nostalgia or more feelings of joy from different aspects, maybe, but it seemed like the natural path to take to explore the joy I already felt from seeing something in display.
It just seems quite interesting and kind of, for use of want of another better word, tautologist, to think about the joy of screen while watching a screen.
Yeah.
But you've gone to a museum.
Yeah.
And in a way, it might have been more challenging, and I would like to know how you feel about this, taking something that spans a much wider aspect of history that people know even less about, especially young people. We're kind of aware of the
Yeah.
involvement of,
Yeah.
and films have come out recently, Side by Side, which explains the kind of development of video production.
Mhm.
People are quite aware of that, maybe more so than other rituals and pastimes, things
Mhm.
like that, that
Mm.
I don't know how you feel about that.
Mm.
So I'm talking about
It
the
would've
kind
been-
of creative content of the pro
Yeah.
rather than the production.
Yeah, I think from a research point of view, it could have been more difficult, maybe to find information on, let's say, old games
Mhm.
that no one's played for 100 years, 150 years. It might have been more difficult. It could have potentially been more interesting. It might have also been more difficult to actually make it interesting on the screen. So actually give it some life, or
Mhm.
yeah, it would have been more challenging. I think
Sometimes challenge
is good. I like challenge.
it's inspirational.
Yeah.
It makes you see things unconventionally.
Mm.
You have to put information across in a different way.
Yeah. 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 That would have been. Yeah. I did fall
Maybe
into
something
I
to
did
think
fall into
about.
a comfort zone.
Slightly.
A lot. But it's certainly something to think about for the future. Just
Yeah.
try and push myself that little bit further. I think that's also why I fell into the trap of using Encore, because again it was comfortable, and I didn't feel I had enough time maybe to learn what I needed to do in Flash.
I don't think in a professional environment you can ever justify things because you don't know a certain bit of
Yeah.
software.
Yeah.
You told the client that they would get a product.
Mm-hmm.
So that aside, which areas of the production process, you talked about testing,
Mm-hmm.
any other areas of the production process that you think could have had more attention?
The visuals, definitely the visuals. Like I say, the whole thing felt very flat and inorganic and just fakery. It's absolute fakery. Like I said, I would have liked to have maybe experimented with physically going in and filming the objects and bits and pieces. And obviously we did originally arrange to do this, but obviously things got in the way, plans changed. I think that's the main part, the actual visual side of it. I think the interface part is fine, absolutely perfect, simple, obvious, intuitive. But yeah, I think it's the visuals, definitely.
Okay.
I don't know I think you may have said it, but you said that like your materials seem quite like fakery, quite.
Yeah.
Where did you get your materials from? Like, I seem to remember like all the textures. Where did you get them?
All the textures were free. The wood texture was free. Everything else and the paper textures were all free. And everything else I created. So the phone I created. The Mutascope poster was a combination of pieces. The photography of the item was obviously mine. Also,
Video stuff, yeah.
all the video stuff, the newspaper on there that I created.
So for example, the wood texture, which is quite like a dominant material, was that like a free download type thing?
As a free download, yeah, I could have
Photography,
photographed
yeah,
it.
that's
Yeah.
what I I mean,
Again, if I had just photographed it, it still would have felt a
Yeah, I
bit
know what you
fake,
mean. Yeah.
rather than if I'd have taken a camera and moved around a physical desk.
It's 'cause you haven't got, I think that, yeah,
Yeah,
could go into it for ages.
absolutely.
You could make things more like 3D, so like the
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from again, from the fakery side of it, I could have altered the camera angle, made it 3D, extruded bits and pieces to make them look thicker and things like that. But again, it still wouldn't have felt organic. It might have looked a little bit more 3D, but it wouldn't, still would have been fake and not quite what it's supposed to be.
I would have imagined that art and design students engaged with the same kind of a project would have gone to different places to research. So you went and looked at interface design and similar existing products out there, but there's further primary research that you could do that would help you design the narrative, would design, the concept. What kind of places do you think those might be? Primary research.
Primary research, places to go.
Considering it's to do with moving image and the production of.
Just cinemas and actually sort of going. There is a section at the end of the interactive piece where I have used more fakery to move you down through a cinema, sit down and the curtains open. We actually obviously have a large cinema complex. We have a smaller one, and then obviously we have the theatres as well that I could have used.
I think it's just been really exciting to go and photograph in there, sketch, discuss with the projectionist what it's like, lots of cinema, references cinema. We all remember what the kind of textiles of the seats feel like, and that it's carpet going up the steps to,
And it's sticky on the floor.